Shirley Jones was once America's sweetheart, the radiant star of Oklahoma, and the mother figure of the Partridge family. But behind her smile was a marriage that tested every limit of her endurance. Her husband, Jack Cassidy, was dazzling to the public, handsome, charming, magnetic. But at home, he lived by rules that tore Shirley apart piece by piece. For decades, she kept his secrets, protecting both his career and their family. Only in her 90s did Shirley finally speak with complete honesty, and what she revealed shocked even those who thought they already knew the story. The beginning of a dream turned complicated. Shirley Jones's path to stardom began far from the glitz of Hollywood. Born in 1934 in Charleroi, Pennsylvania, she grew up in a small town where the highlight of her week was watching movies at the local theater. By age 12, her extraordinary singing voice had convinced local teachers that she needed professional training. She studied at the Pittsburgh Playhouse, where she learned acting and dance, unknowingly laying the foundation for a career that would define her generation. In 1955, she was cast as Laurie in the film version of Oklahoma, a role that launched her straight into stardom. At just 21 years old, she was already working under a rare personal contract with Rodgers and Hammerstein, making her the only performer ever to hold such an arrangement. It was in this whirlwind of opportunity that Jack Cassidy entered her life. 10 years her senior, Cassidy was already a Broadway star, known for his magnetic presence in shows like Wish You Were Here. Their first encounter came during rehearsals for a European tour of Oklahoma in 1955. Cassidy, though married at the time, introduced himself with bold confidence, walking across the room to greet Shirley as if he had known her all along. "My name is Jack Cassidy," he told her, "and it's a pleasure to work with you." Shirley admitted she had never been one to swoon over handsome men, but there was something different about Jack. Beyond his looks, she saw wit, charm, and a theatrical flair that immediately captivated her. When the production reached Paris, Jack invited her to dinner. He promised champagne and escargot, both of which she had never tried. Against her better judgment, she went. That night, after laughter and stories, Jack walked her back to their hotel, kissed her on the cheek, and said words that stunned her. "I'm going to marry you." Shirley reminded him he was already married, but Jack simply smiled and repeated his promise. It was the beginning of a relationship that would thrill, torment, and ultimately haunt Shirley for the rest of her life. The marriage and its cracks. By 1956, Jack Cassidy kept his word. He divorced his first wife, dancer and actress Evelyn Ward, and married Shirley Jones. At just 22, Shirley entered not only a marriage but also instant motherhood, becoming stepmother to Jack's son, David Cassidy, who was already showing signs of the charisma that would later make him a teen idol. Their union seemed glamorous from the outside, Broadway star Mary's rising Hollywood beauty, but beneath the glitter, fractures were already forming. The early years of their marriage were a balancing act between Shirley's skyrocketing career and Jack's restless ambitions. While she won critical acclaim in films like Carousel and Elmer Gantry, which earned her an Academy Award, Jack struggled with the feeling that he was being eclipsed. His Broadway successes had made him respected, but Shirley's crossover to Hollywood and mainstream fame made her the brighter star in the public eye. That imbalance, Shirley would later admit, fueled Jack's insecurities and drove him deeper into behaviors that threatened to destroy them both. Jack Cassidy had always been magnetic. Friends described him as the life of every party, a man whose presence could fill any room. But for Jack, attention was not just a gift, it was a drug. Shirley would later reveal that he craved constant admiration, and no amount of love or loyalty could satisfy him for long. His flirtations with women quickly escalated into full-blown affairs. At first, Shirley tried to dismiss them, telling herself that such behavior was part of the Hollywood lifestyle. She was deeply in love and desperately wanted to keep their marriage intact. But Jack's infidelities didn't stop at women. Quietly, whispers began circulating in Hollywood that Cassidy also pursued relationships with men. At a time when such rumors could ruin a career overnight, these stories were both shocking and dangerous. Shirley, however, knew they were true. In her later memoir, she openly confirmed that Jack was bisexual, something he admitted to her in private. He told her directly that he wanted to experience everything in life, every passion, every desire. Fidelity, he insisted, was not in his nature. For Shirley, the revelation was devastating. She had grown up with small-town values, believing in loyalty, faith, and the sanctity of marriage. But now she realized she was married to a man who could never fully belong to her. The 1960s became a decade of contradiction for Shirley. On screen, she thrived, with roles that cemented her status as one of Hollywood's most beloved actresses. Off-screen, she played the dutiful wife, smiling for the cameras, raising their 3 sons, Sean, Patrick, and Ryan, and holding their fractured marriage together by sheer will. Yet inside, she admitted, she was unraveling. Jack's betrayals were not occasional lapses, they were a lifestyle. And what hurt most was that he no longer bothered to hide them. At parties, he would openly flirt, sometimes vanishing for hours and reappearing as though nothing had happened. Friends recalled moments when Jack bragged about his encounters, even in Shirley's presence, as if daring her to protest. She rarely did. Instead, she swallowed her pain, convinced that leaving him would mean shattering her family. But each year the burden grew heavier, and Shirley began to lose pieces of herself in the process, the public facade and private collapse. By the 1970s, Shirley Jones seemed to embody the American dream. She was cast as the widowed mother in the Partridge Family, a television phenomenon that debuted in 1970. For 4 seasons, audiences adored her as the nurturing matriarch who raised her children while fronting a family pop band. The irony, however, was that while she played the picture of stability on television, her real family life was unraveling behind the scenes. The success of the Partridge Family only deepened the divide between Shirley and Jack. She was a household name, celebrated not just for her acting, but also for her singing. Jack, meanwhile, resented being overshadowed by his wife's fame. In her memoir, Shirley confessed that his sense of inferiority grew so intense that it drove him to infidelity more often than before. His reckless behavior escalated, and he no longer cared about the consequences. By this time, Shirley was raising not only her 3 sons with Jack, but also managing the complicated relationship with her stepson David Cassidy, who had become a teen idol through the very same show. The public saw a glowing, unified family on television, but in reality, tensions ran high. David's childhood wounds, learning of his parents' divorce from neighborhood kids, had left scars, and although he eventually developed a close bond with Shirley, the family dynamic was far from perfect. As for Jack, his double life became impossible to ignore. Rumors circulated in Hollywood about his relationships with both women and men. At parties, he was known to drink heavily, flirt shamelessly, and sometimes boast about his conquests. Shirley admitted that he seemed almost to enjoy flaunting his affairs, testing how far he could push her tolerance. For Shirley, every public appearance became an act of endurance. She smiled for cameras, praised her husband in interviews, and played her role as the perfect wife. Privately, she was heartbroken, humiliated, and exhausted from forgiving betrayals that never stopped. The emotional toll was staggering. Friends later revealed that Shirley often broke down in tears in private, confessing that she didn't know how much longer she could endure it. Yet she still loved Jack deeply. That contradiction, loving a man who caused her so much pain, defined her marriage. She admitted that he was the love of her life, even as he broke her piece by piece. By 1974, Shirley had reached her breaking point. She filed for divorce, ending a marriage that had lasted nearly 2 decades. But the end of their union did not mean freedom from tragedy. What came next would shock Shirley in ways she could never have imagined, leaving her to carry both grief and unanswered questions for the rest of her life. Jack Cassidy's tragic end. When Shirley Jones finally separated from Jack Cassidy in 1974, she believed the storm of their marriage was behind her. She was free to focus on her children and her career without the weight of Jack's constant betrayals. Yet even after their divorce, Jack never truly left her life. He continued to call, sometimes trying to reconcile, other times simply reaching out in loneliness. Shirley later recalled that one evening in December 1976, Jack phoned her and asked her to come over for drinks. She declined, unwilling to step back into the emotional chaos he represented. Hours later, the decision would haunt her. In the early morning of December 12, 1976, Jack Cassidy fell asleep on his couch in his West Hollywood apartment with a cigarette in hand. The smoldering ash ignited the sofa, and within minutes the fire engulfed the room. Jack, only 49 years old, was trapped inside. His death was as reckless and tragic as his life had been, a sudden and fiery end to a man who had lived without boundaries. For Shirley, the news was devastating. She was no longer his wife, but she still loved him. In her memoir, she admitted that had Jack not died, she wasn't sure she would have married her second husband, comedian Marty Ingalls. The connection she felt to Jack, no matter how destructive, had never disappeared. His death left her with a mixture of grief, regret, and unresolved love. The tragedy also left an indelible mark on their children. Sean, Patrick, and Ryan were still young, and losing their father so suddenly scarred them deeply. David Cassidy, too, struggled with the weight of his father's erratic legacy. In later years, David spoke openly about Jack's narcissism and instability, linking much of his own pain and eventual battles with addiction to the chaos he grew up with. Jack Cassidy's death made headlines across Hollywood, but the public narrative focused on the dramatic circumstances of the fire rather than the personal wreckage he left behind. Shirley, once again, put on a brave face for the world, but privately, she was left grappling with a haunting truth. She had loved a man she could never truly have, and his reckless choices had destroyed not only their marriage, but also his life. A second marriage and the weight of secrets. After Jack Cassidy's tragic death, Shirley Jones faced the difficult task of rebuilding her life. In 1977, she found unexpected companionship with comedian Marty Ingalls. Their marriage, which many described as an odd couple pairing, was filled with clashes of personality, humor, and deep affection. Shirley later admitted that Marty's eccentric nature often exasperated her, but he also gave her stability and devotion that Jack never could. The two co-wrote a book, Shirley and Marty, an unlikely love story, chronicling their unusual but enduring bond. They remained together until Marty's death in 2015, nearly 4 decades after they first wed. Despite finding love again, Shirley never completely escaped the shadow of her first marriage. Jack Cassidy remained a haunting presence in her memories. She confessed in interviews that she still considered him the great love of her life, even as she acknowledged the pain he caused. That paradox, adoring the man who broke her, continued to define her reflections for years. For decades, Shirley kept the darkest truths of her marriage private. Hollywood gossip had swirled in the 1960s and 1970s about Jack's double life, but Shirley stayed silent, protecting both his reputation and their children. It wasn't until later in life that she finally began to speak openly. In her 2013 memoir, Shirley Jones, a memoir, she revealed that Jack had never once been faithful during their marriage. She confirmed what had long been whispered, that Jack pursued affairs not only with women, but also with men. He had told her bluntly that fidelity was impossible for him, that he wanted to experience everything life had to offer. Shirley admitted that she had endured this reality for the sake of her children, choosing silence over scandal. By the time she was in her 80s, Shirley began to lift the veil entirely. In interviews, she explained how deeply Jack's behavior had wounded her, leaving her feeling humiliated and diminished, as though she was never enough. She described the agony of playing the perfect wife in public while breaking down in private, and she confessed that she often asked herself why she stayed. The answer, she said simply, was love. She loved Jack so completely that she could not let go no matter how much it cost her. Her candor was shocking, even to those who had suspected the truth. By finally exposing Jack's secrets, Shirley reshaped how Hollywood remembered him, not just as a charismatic star who died young, but as a deeply troubled man whose self-destructive appetites left wreckage in his wake. Final confessions. By the time Shirley Jones reached 92, she had nothing left to protect. In interviews and her memoir, she finally admitted that Jack Cassidy had lived a double life, unfaithful with countless women and also with men. She revealed how he flaunted his betrayals, how he confessed that fidelity was not in his nature, and how she endured it in silence for decades. For Shirley, speaking out was not about revenge, but about liberation. After a lifetime of secrecy, she wanted the truth to be known. Her words stunned fans and critics alike. The man once remembered only for his charm was re-examined through the lens of recklessness and addiction to attention. Yet Shirley never painted him as a villain. Even after everything, she called him the love of her life. That contradiction, enduring love tangled with endless pain, became her final testimony about their marriage. It was a story of devotion and destruction, told only when age had finally given her freedom. Shirley Jones carried Jack Cassidy's secrets for decades before finally telling the truth. Do you think she should have revealed it sooner, or was she right to wait until later in life? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more untold Hollywood stories.